iHeartRadio presents Podversations, a weekly discussion with the biggest names and influencers in podcasting.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for joining us again on these Thursday speaker series that we've been doing. This is very honestly my favorite 30 minutes in the week when I get to take a break and talk to people that I either really admire in the industry and sometimes are friends of mine too. And today is definitely both of those. Today is a very cool session for me personally. I get to talk to two friends of mine, but also just two creators that I think are at the top of their game in podcasting and comedy. We launched a show before we were part of iHeartRadio. We were a company called Stuff Media, and we've been building a podcast network for almost 10 years. And one of the shows we launched, one of the last shows we actually launched before getting acquired by iHeartRadio to become the iHeartRadio podcast division, was a show called the Daily Zeitgeist. And today we have two hosts from that show, Jack O'Brien and Miles Gray, joining us. Jack, Miles, first of all, I know you guys are slammed for reasons that we will get into as we talk about what you do with your days and weeks. But first of all, just thank you so much for joining today. It really does mean a lot to me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yes, for having us.
Jack, I'll start with you. So I think one of the coolest things about podcasting is that it's still a relatively new medium, and anybody in this medium didn't start out as a podcaster. They were doing something before they were doing podcasting. I think that keeps it really interesting. We all have sort of diverse backstories, and we bring a lot of other industries to the table, whether it's TV or film or print or whatever the case may be. So Jack, what were you doing before you were doing podcasting full time?
Sure. So I started a website like a decade ago or more, a decade and a half ago, called crack.com. That was just like a humor website. I was just out of college, and we kind of steadily grew that over the course of a decade to be a pretty massive humor site. But there were just some things about, the online publishing, whether it be articles or videos, that were becoming more and more frustrating. We were more and more reliant on social media to get our content distributed, and social media was more and more willing to throttle your content just depending on how much you paid. And meanwhile, I had also launched a podcast for that website that I hosted called the Cracked Podcast, and very creatively titled. And that was just the most fun part of my job. I loved podcasting. I loved the direct access that it gave me to our audience. It also kind of gave a look behind the scenes, because I would just take the most interesting conversations from our editorial room and bring them to our audience. And I just felt like there was a huge opportunity there. And also, it was just the type of content I was consuming more than any other type of content. And it just seemed like it was kind of circumvented some of those issues we were having in the online publishing space, whether it be video or written stuff, because it just gives you, there's so many different paths in podcasting to reach an audience. So it really just gives you you get directly plugged into the people you're trying to reach.
Very cool. Miles, what about you, man? What were you doing before being a podcaster full time?
Before that, starting way back, I used to work in politics as a political consultant, lobbyist for a number of years. Got fully disillusioned by that. So I went into comedy, my first love. And from there, I just basically was, while like any comedian, trying to become an improviser who got on The Office or Parks and Rec eventually. Once that path dried out a bit, I started sort of making viral video and viral content for different companies. So first started working for a radio station in LA, then worked for YouTube, then Playboy, then Condé Nast Entertainment was where I was right before coming to the Stuff Media / iHeart Network, where I was directing and developing like video series for Condé Nast Entertainment. So I've always kind of had my hands in the content space, but I think like everything, like I was there at the beginning of digital video and then sort of like rode that out to like the top point. And podcasting was just something that I was always consuming in the background in my day to day. And I was like, I was always making things for other people or other brands. And it felt like, podcasting was just so appealing because it feels like it's one of those places where the creator is fully in control of what they make. So it was a very, an anticipated switch that I made, and I haven't regretted it since.
It's pretty awesome to be able to sit in a room, and then this is a pretty good example of it, like just the array of experiences that people bring to this medium, the jobs they had before this medium. When you guys rattle off all the stuff you were doing from political consultation to being, a member of a founding team of a pretty big website, that I think feeds all the creative muscle of this industry right now. Is when you're in a room with the executives who are leading it and greenlighting shows and developing shows, they're bringing a lot of other experience to the table. So the Daily Zeitgeist, you guys developed this idea. This has quietly built an insane super fan base of listeners, and it's not even some niche anymore. I mean, it's several million downloads a month on this show that started out as a comedic take on pop culture and the news cycle. Maybe I'll let you guys explain it better than me, but now I think has evolved into something a little more, maybe even more important than maybe even you even thought to begin with. But we'll get into that. Where did the idea come from, Jack, to start with? Like, how did you guys sit down and say, we should probably do a show, this is the conceit, this is the format, this is what we want it to be and not be? Just walk us through that cycle a little bit.
Yeah. So like I said, podcasting was the way I was consuming most content at the time that I came over. And this was just a show that I wanted to exist that didn't exist at the time. I found myself refreshing my feed to like get the latest, political podcasts and pop culture podcasts. And there wasn't a show that was daily that kind of brought them all together and gave you kind of a survey of everything that was going on. And then I've always just been passionate about sort of wedding high and low culture. To Miles's point about 90 Day Fiance, I think his being in touch with that part of the zeitgeist brings a lot of insight to our show. Yesterday, we had a really in-depth conversation on the show about how, like, the insights that you can glean into our political moment based on what's happening in The Bachelor at any given time. And like that, I think, is the sweet spot for the show, because it's, taking what is happening in sort of our collective consciousness and tying it to, the political moment and some things that aren't always super fun to talk about, but giving people an opportunity to experience and stay up on those not fun things in a way that keeps you keeps you feeling alive.
And Miles, why did you hear about this and say, I want in? That's the thing I want to put a lot of my time against. That's exactly it. What drew you to it?
Like I was saying before, I was at Condé Nast and I was having a great time, like making series like Google autocomplete and like accent critique and a lot of the stuff that got a lot of views over there. But given the background of what was happening, I felt that I had something more to offer aside from just developing and directing digital video content. I felt that I had a perspective that was pretty unique in that I've had my hands in the machine politically from about 2009 and, got into it very idealistically when Obama was running for president. And then sort of once I began to see what for what it was, my sort of perspective changed. And, Jack was asking all kinds of people to gauge their interest to see who would be like a good co-host. But I just felt, given my sort of having my feet in many different ponds and working in different industries, it was like a really good fit. And it, again, like I was saying, it offered me a moment to have a voice, really. And I never really even thought of myself as like someone who was going to have a podcast or someone who would get into that. In my mind, I was like, yeah, I'll probably run a digital department doing video and stuff like that. But just the second Jack even asked me, like all these things clicked in my mind. And I was like, Absolutely. Actually, I think this is the exact intersection of every job and experience I've had that I can use to really offer listeners something that will keep them engaged. And with my background in political organizing, I realize, apathy is such a huge thing you have to fight against when you want people to be politically engaged or to be engaged at all. And this just felt like, oh, it's just a great opportunity where it's like, we're going to give you stuff that is really meaningful, but, do it in a way that feels conversational and accessible without just sort of just taking all the doom out of it or just taking all the doom in from it.
Yeah. And I should state at the top here, like, you guys have launched an incredible show with a big fan base now, but you are not just quote unquote podcast hosts, right? Like, you actually are part of the leadership team that runs the iHeartRadio Podcast Network's LA studio. And out of that studio, we produce a ton of stuff, right? So Will Ferrell's entire slate of shows, Shondaland Audio produces most of their stuff out of there, Shonda Rhimes' slate of shows, Chelsea Handler, the list goes on and on. So Jack, like, it's one thing to jump in and say, I want to do a podcast. I have a very clear idea what it is and what it should be about and not about. But now you're executive producing a slate of shows with truly some of the biggest creators of our lives from any medium. What is that like? How do you shepherd somebody into this medium like a Will Ferrell who wants to bring this iconic IP, Ron Burgundy? How does that go?
Yeah, fortunately, the thing that's great about podcasting is a lot of it is getting out of the way. The thing that's great about podcasting is giving these incredibly talented people direct access to their audience without a whole lot of mediation, without, even without a lot of cuts. You're just letting people hear what it's really like to be in a room with Ron Burgundy in some cases, but Chelsea Handler, the Workaholics podcast, that was one of my favorite shows. Conal, I know you really liked it. It was on Comedy Central for 7 seasons. But, we had one meeting with these guys and we were like, oh, that show might as well have been a reality show. Like, they are their characters. The jokes that they come up with organically are the same level of jokes that you were seeing on the show. They were actually living in the rundown house that they shot that show in. And so it was we just got so excited to be able to, put that in front of audiences and let the magic that is those guys being in a room together just free. And yeah, so I mean, a lot of it is super surreal. I can still remember going to Anchorman in movie theaters and just having my world changed by just how brilliant that was. So being in a room with Will is unbelievable, but it's fortunately because of this industry, it's really easy to just tee them up and tee their teams up. A lot of these folks just have these ecosystems around them of people who are so good at the thing they're good at and so good at highlighting the thing that they're good at. It's pretty easy in the podcast space to tee those folks up and just let them do what they do.
Miles, what's that moment like for you? And you're brainstorming an episode, a moment, a beat, a shtick with a guy like Will Ferrell, and it's weird because you're probably there this dude is a comedic hero of mine, but in that moment you're the authority because podcasting better than Will Ferrell does. What's that like?
It was one of those moments I remember where before it was within a year and a half of me leaving my job. If you had told me when I had left to start working in podcasting, just very narrowly to work on Daily Zeitgeist, and said, you will be giving notes to Will Ferrell and you will actually be punching up some of his jokes and he will say, I like that, and incorporate it into a show, there's no way I saw no way to get there. But that just shows you how immediately things have changed so quickly, and the amount of talent that's getting into the industry. it really is surreal. And it was actually one of the greatest moments I think I've had. It was like one of the most validating moments I've had, where you're kind of reading a script and you're like, I think this joke could be better, but who am I to tell Will Ferrell about this? But he's such a great collaborator that he'll stop and say, what do you guys think of this? I think maybe this could be better. Do you guys think so? What do you guys think? And he opens up the discussion for that. And it allows for, I think that's truly like what makes this all work really well, is that it's collaborative, and we're allowing a lot of these creators to do a thing that they actually themselves don't get to do a lot. Because even for Will or the Workaholics guys, there's standards and practices. There's like legal stuff that goes through where sometimes they might not be able to have a topic or a joke, or not that necessarily that they're controversial, but there are other stakeholders that have input. And I think that's what is also really attractive, especially for a lot of these creators. It's like, I'm everything. I'm the executive producer, I'm the showrunner, I'm the writer, or I can call those shots. And so it allows for like really a new dimension of their creativity to come out. And it's just a blessing to be there. And yeah, with our knowledge and trust to be able to, participate in that process is unbelievable.
That makes a lot of sense to me. I want to talk real quick before we wrap about the brands side of this, to switch gears for a second. I think that as podcasting hits 100 million people in the country now listening to podcasts every month, it's also the best ad product out there. And I think you spoke to that a little bit, Miles, when you say, like, look, when creators come in, they realize they can own the whole experience, and that is different and cool. And I impress this upon new brands who are thinking about podcasting every day. The ad load is light, and we can define it. Hosts will tell your message to their super fans. It is the single best ad product in media right now. But maybe just talk about that for a second, like Miles, from a creator's perspective, right? Like, it's one thing to make a great show, and you guys do, but is you being a part of and controlling to some extent the ads as well, is that really meaningful to you? And maybe talk about a good experience you had with a sponsor.
Absolutely. I mean, I think first, I used to make branded video content before, and it would be very stale. Like, I'd watch it and be like, man, no, I get that this X company put a lot of money into this branded video, but someone as a viewer is going to be like, this is a branded video, and I'm going to check out. So when the opportunity came for us to do ads, or like any podcast, you're going to do ads, and you kind of get like, here are talking points. And like, there's no script that I have to read verbatim. They're like, no, they want you to express yourself. I'm like, that's perfect, because my personality isn't going to try and persuade someone that I believe in a product by saying like, and it has been verified 4 out of 5 researchers agree. I'm like, no, I'm going to say, oh my, wait, hold on. How are you guys sleeping? What kind of bed are you on? Okay, let me tell you about this thing I have, because my back hurts in this very specific place. Like, I want to be able to talk like I'm talking to somebody, because I'm very much like a advocate for things that I love to people, like early adopter and things like that. So I'm always screaming from like the mountaintops about stuff I love. So I think a great experience I had personally was when Mazda wanted to do something with us. I drive a Mazda. So it was a no-brainer. I love Mazda cars. I just feel like I'm a fan. So naturally, I'm going to have a different connection with it, because I really believe in it, and it's a product I actually use. So I think that's really like the X factor in it, is that it allows, for a creator to actually sincerely express themselves in service of, marketing something. But it's done in a way where like, we can say what we want to, who we choose to advertise with. And then on top of that, when we do, like, we're giving a great endorsement because we want to, we want to work with them. So it makes for like a really fun ad reads. And I think our listeners also love that, because we get to be funny, and it's not like a very straightforward ad read. It's very much in the personality of the show. And so we get a lot of people who are like still talk about old ads we've done, like for The Economist or like Spotify. And they're like, do you have that recorded somewhere? And we're like, no, that was just for a very brief window, but maybe we can look.
Yeah, exactly. I think some of the Ron Burgundy ad reads for Charmin toilet paper are some of the single best pieces of content ever made by humans. So good example. But look, it's not every day that you can say like, I'm making a great ad product for brands. I'm also making a show that is just killer. So we are at time. I could genuinely talk to you guys for another half hour very easily, but I want to respect all our viewers' times too. Jack, Miles, thank you guys so much for taking a half hour to talk to us. I really do appreciate it. I think that it's one thing to launch a great comedy podcast. You guys have done that, but I think it's another thing to give something to listeners that's truly thoughtful and meaningful through a comedic lens, usually. In a year like this, it's actually content we need. And so I really do deeply appreciate it. And thank you guys for joining today.
Yeah, thanks, Conal.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Everybody stay safe. We will see you next Thursday. Take care, guys.
Podversations is a production of iHeartRadio. You can find more from the biggest names in podcasting on the iHeartRadio app or wherever you get your podcasts.